Vladimir Putin holds a minute's silence for fallen pilots killed in the Russian response to the Wagner rebellion. New Zealand aims to boost economic ties with China through trade, tourism and education. The UN highlights the number of Afghan civilians killed since the Taliban takeover in 2021. And the damning report rocking English cricket, slamming entrenched racism, sexism and misogyny. I'm Lin Evlin. This is SBS World News. Good evening. Exiled mercenary chief Yevgeny Prigozhin is believed to have touched down in Belarus tonight, 3 days after his extraordinary armed mutiny against the Kremlin. Russian state media say a criminal investigation by the FSB security service into his Wagner paramilitary group has been dropped following Sunday's deal with Vladimir Putin to defuse the crisis. A short time ago, the Russian president addressed troops inside the Kremlin, honouring Russian pilots killed by Wagner troops. In attendance, Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu, whom Wagner fighters had earlier called for his sacking. The president praising Russian forces, saying they stopped a civil war. He also said Wagner fighters were doomed to fail. The Kremlin's line, Putin's position has not been shaken despite the unprecedented challenge to his power. Mr. Prigozhin has also broken his silence, strongly defending his failed uprising.
2 days on from a weekend of chaos, Moscow today calm and mostly sunny. But while life goes on after a short-lived insurrection, clouds continue to hang over the Kremlin as Russia's people try to make sense of what happened.
Потому что непонятная ситуация, тревожно было. Надежды не теряли, что все выправится ситуация.
Vladimir Putin's critics say the mutiny exposed significant cracks in his armour. But many observers warn to never count the strong man out. After a day away from the cameras, the president returned in force. Visibly angry, his short speech denouncing the rebellion full of vitriol.
Our civil solidarity has shown that any blackmail, any attempt to create internal turmoil is doomed to failure. They will be brought to justice.
The Kremlin then releasing vision of the president chairing a meeting and thanking his advisors. Among them, Defence Minister Sergei Shoigu, a key target in the rebellion. President Putin also appealed to Wagner mercenaries in his address, calling them patriots and offering them 3 options: either lay down their arms, join Russia's military, or be banished to exile in Belarus. Not once did he mention their leader by name. Yevgeny Prigozhin, once Vladimir Putin's chef and close ally, has reportedly been spotted at a hotel in the Belarusian capital. But his grand departure from Rostov-on-Don remains the last time he was officially seen. The foul-mouthed renegade releasing an 11-minute audio message calling his so-called march to Moscow a masterclass that Russia's military should have followed when it first invaded Ukraine.
The goal of our march was to prevent the destruction of Wagner and bring those who made a huge number of mistakes during the special military operation to justice. We marched to express our protest, not to oust our country's government.
Mr. Prigozhin claims he was responding to a Russian military attack on a Wagner camp that killed 30 of his fighters. But unequivocally among Putin loyalists, he is a traitor, aided by the West, according to Russia's Prime Minister and state television. A familiar Moscow line dismissed in Washington.
We gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
The White House says it is too soon to tell the rebellion's impact. The UK preparing for a range of scenarios, as Ukraine claims tactical gains on the front lines. President Zelensky says his forces have retaken villages and are advancing on all sectors in its counter-offensive. But Russia says it has launched dozens of missile strikes around eastern Donetsk and hit a Ukrainian arms depot. further reminders, if the world needed them, that despite the unrest in Russia, there has been no let-up in the war in Ukraine. Omer Dehan, SBS World News.
In Kherson, floodwaters are receding following the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam, but experts fear the disaster is evolving into a long-term environmental catastrophe. Across the region's mudflats, thousands of fish lay gasping for air. Local wildlife have lost nets and food sources, and vegetation has also been destroyed.
We will have the problem of the so-called lost generation hole, when part of the animals will die now and in the future will not be able to reproduce their descendants. Accordingly, we will have problems with certain species of animals for several decades.
Ukraine is dubbed the breadbasket of the world, but thousands of hectares of farmland remains underwater, wiping out fertile land for crops. At the same time, irrigation canals have also been drained, creating further headaches for farmers. Authorities are also testing the waters for pollutants. New Zealand Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing. Mr Hipkins leads a delegation made up of business leaders in health, tourism and education to try and boost his country's export growth. Earlier today, while attending the World Economic Forum in Tianjin, Mr Hipkins said the world needs to be more outward-looking when seeking solutions to various global challenges.
I think the whole world will need to work together to solve challenges around climate change, to solve challenges around a shifting population demographic. As the nature of population growth changes quite dramatically in the coming decades, the whole world is going to have to grapple with that. And so I don't think an inward-looking focus for any country is going to serve their longer-term interests particularly well.
It's the first visit by a Prime Minister of New Zealand to China since 2019. The Israeli Foreign Minister has described Fiji as a true friend of Israel after the South Pacific nation announced it will open an embassy next year in Jerusalem. But the news came not long after 3 Fijian soldiers were detained in the Golan Heights on allegations of drug smuggling. It's alleged the UN peacekeepers were trying to smuggle liquid cocaine into Israel from Jordan disguised as a component of perfume-making kits. The Fiji military is liaising with Israeli authorities on the matter. A new United Nations report has found more than 1,000 Afghan civilians have been killed since the Taliban took over in 2021. The majority of deaths were caused by improvised explosive devices, including suicide bombings. While armed fighting has decreased since the Taliban took over, the country is still facing security challenges, including threats from IS. A German court has found the former chief executive of Audi guilty of fraud over the Volkswagen diesel emission scandal. Rupert Stadler is reportedly facing a suspended sentence of 21 months and a $1.7 million fine. He's the highest-ranking executive convicted over the scandal in which illegal software was being used to help cheat emissions tests. Coming up, why melting glaciers are putting millions of Pakistan-held Kashmir residents at risk.